A very good evening. You're watching India Global. So good to be back. I'm Gaurie Dwivedi. Let's start the show with headlines coming in this Thursday evening. First up, US President Donald Trump calls Ukraine President Zelensky a dictator as the feud between the two intensifies. In fact, Donald Trump says that Russia holds the cards in peace talks. This comes in as Zelensky is set to meet Trump's Ukraine envoy. Reports indicate that Ukraine has blocked the Trump-owned Truth Social ahead of such talks. Terror organization Hamas returns bodies of 4 Israeli hostages held captive since the 7th of October in 2023. Hamas has released bodies of the youngest Israeli hostages, and they've claimed that all 4 hostages died by Israeli airstrikes. That's the claim made by the terror organization. Bangladesh and India conclude first high-level border talks. This is the first high-level border talks that have taken place between the two countries since Sheikh Hasina's ouster. PGP says the reports of attacks on minorities in Bangladesh are exaggerated. India and Bangladesh agreed to address border crimes and illegal crossings in that meeting. Donald Trump on Tesla's entry into India says that it's very unfair to America. In fact, Trump versus Musk, India at the center of the storm over Tesla entry into one of the world's largest automobile markets. And India Global gets you exclusive conversation with the first Indian origin German election candidate from Jaipur to Bundestag, Siddharth Mudgal, on NDTV. All right, the first story that we are tracking on India Global is the latest that's unfolding in Pakistan. A key ally of Imran Khan has said that an offer was being made to the jailed former Prime Minister for the nullification of his disqualification amidst reports of the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf seeking some sort of backdoor rapprochement with the military, with the deep state. Sahibzada Hamiz Raza, who is the chief of the Sunni Ittihad Council, made this claim, saying that while the PTI founder did not demand the release of any party leader during the talks with the Sharif government, but in fact an offer is being made to set aside his disqualification in the next 3 months. He's been disqualified on more than one occasion because, remember, there are multiple cases of conviction against Imran Khan. The Election Commission of Pakistan disqualified Khan first in August 2023, or 5 years from holding any public office following a trial court's verdict in the first Tosha Khana case. This development comes after reports indicated that the PTI was eager to restart some sort of rapprochement talks with the establishment. Remember, weeks-long negotiations have gone in the past, leading to absolutely no conclusion whatsoever. Imran Khan remains popular. His clarion calls have led to a lot of people coming on the streets. There have been logjam both on the streets and in the political circles in Pakistan, leading to a situation where it could lead to major political security crisis. And what it started was the judicial reforms, or supposed judicial reforms in Pakistan. Okay, let's get in Batul Rajput, who's a journalist, joining me live from Lahore to talk to us about the latest that's unfolding there. Thank you so much, Mr. Rajput, for speaking to me. And let me start by asking you, this is not the first time that one is hearing talks of possible rapprochement between Imran Khan and the ISI and the military. How much should we pay attention to these talks, given that they've been circling around for several months now?
Thank you so much for inviting. This is a big news. Whenever we hear to this kind of stuff that PTI has shown interest, or there is an unconfirmed news of initiative of talks within or by the establishment, it has become a breaking news every time. But let me tell you seriously, at this very moment in Pakistan, it does not get any news value because in the past we have seen that Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, primarily led by Imran Khan, it has literally wasted a lot of political opportunities where it could capitalize just by sitting with political parties. But unfortunately, Imran Khan does not consider political parties as much as he considers the military establishment. You very boldly said ISI, but primarily when we address this issue in Pakistan, we say that there are some issues with the political party and the establishment. Because it was not only the agency, it was some other military officials. Those were targeted politically by Imran Khan. So it has become a personal grudge when it comes to when it comes to the intensity of this matter. When we address this as journalists, we really feel that Imran Khan has to go to two
Where do you
steps
see
back.
this going? Ms. Rajput, where do you see this going from here on?
Primarily, we don't take it seriously when we hear the news of talks. For you, it is a news. I'm not seeing it going anywhere because Imran Khan literally says that he only wants to speak to Chief of Army Staff, which is not a political way out. And in the political parties, there is this opinion, whether it's 6-party alliance, whether it's government or the smaller groups that support Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, they have been pushing Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf to sit with the political groups and make a political way out. But unfortunately, Imran Khan does not seems to be convinced. So as long as it is not a political way, we cannot see anything. We cannot see anything materializing out of it.
All right. I end this with what I started this with, which is that this is not the first time these reports have come to surface. They have been circling for some time now. Thank you so much, Ms. Rajput, for speaking to me from Lahore on a story India needs to be very mindful and cognizant of. Shifting focus now, days after Tesla started hiring staff in India, signaling a possible entry into the Indian market, US President Donald Trump has said that any potential plans of the EV maker to build a factory in India to circumvent that country's tariffs would be very unfair. The US president made the remarks during a joint interview with Tesla CEO Elon Musk for Fox News' Sean Hannity. In fact, President Trump recalled that he called out India's high duty on cars during Prime Minister Modi's recent visit to the United States, but agreed to work towards an early trade deal and resolve their possible standoff when it comes to tariffs. Turning attention to the latest unfolding in Ukraine or about Ukraine. Well, in the last 24 hours, the growing feud between US President Donald Trump and his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, has escalated to new heights, or well, one would say new lows, given the fact that Donald Trump is now calling Zelenskyy a dictator. If there were any lingering doubts about Donald Trump's view of the Ukraine war and America's support of Kiev's fight against Russia, he put them to rest in no uncertain terms. So in fact, President Trump said that Zelenskyy wanted to keep the gravy train of foreign aid running. Very, very strong comments coming in against Ukraine president. In fact, this is a day after he appeared to blame Ukraine for starting the war. And what really has been going around in a war that's been going on for almost 3 years? Take a look at this report.
Modestly successful comedian. He refuses to have elections, is low in a dictator without elections. He's not going to have a country left. Got to move.
These words spoken by the US President Donald Trump are not aimed at one of Washington's adversaries. Instead, Zelenskyy, one of the US allies, finds himself at the end of the Trump barrel. The sharp comments were in response to the Ukrainian president's remark that goes like this.
Президент Трамп з великою повагою до нього відносимося як до лідера народу, який ми дуже поважаємо, американський народ, який нас постійно підтримує. На жаль, живе в цьому дезінформаційному просторі.
The sudden war of words erupted after the Russia-US talks in Riyadh this week. Trump falsely blamed Zelenskyy for starting the Ukraine war. This blatant denial of the truth shocked even some Republicans back in the United States. International affairs experts have said that Trump has upended US's foreign policy in just a few days. Wars force people to pick a side, and Trump seems to be cozying up to Vladimir Putin. Zelenskyy has found support in European and UK allies. But Ukraine's largest supplier of weapons, the United States, seems to be swiftly gravitating towards Kremlin's rhetoric on the war. It's been almost 3 years of Russia's invasion, and Trump's attacks are playing into one of Moscow's rationales for the war, that the elected Ukrainian leader was illegitimate. The US has initiated talks on achieving peace in the region, this Trump-Zelensky public spat risks derailing those efforts, or worse, make matters more complicated. With Vishal Vivek, Bureau Report, NDTV World.
Sophie Fullerton, who's a professor of politics at Fordham University, joins me to talk more on this. Sophie, good to have you on the show. How do you see this complete swing in pendulum as far as American politics is concerned? How Zelensky is now being portrayed in the present administration?
I first want to say that such comments made by Trump are not only inappropriate, but they're shameful. This is a country that was invaded by an aggressor and did not ask for any of what Russia is doing on Ukraine. I will say, given Trump's history and his penchant for viewing Putin more in a sympathetic light, I'm not shocked with the way that this is playing out. What's concerning to me, though, is that Putin is an authoritarian dictator that has not only caused chaos in Ukraine, but also in Syria. And if Trump allows for any type of diplomatic relations to be normalized with Putin, what does it mean for the future and what does it mean for other countries? Zelensky has said in the past that if we allow normalization with Russia, we'll see Russia at Europe's door, and we'll see more of this type of authoritarian aggression normalized globally.
So that is one aspect in terms of how Zelensky is now being portrayed. Talk to us about where do you see this going in terms of a possible peace negotiations on this conflict?
To be honest, I don't know, because Trump is very erratic with his foreign policy. We're not talking about a calculated individual and very intellectual when it comes to his foreign policy decisions. We're talking about someone who's very erratic and very much interested in his own self-interests. For Trump's self-interest, that means advancing his America First policies and ideologies, be it isolationism or globalization. So it's hard to say. What is more progressive or positive for me to see is that there's some Republican pushback domestically. What we've been seeing, instead of pushback from Republicans, there's been this go-ahead, basically from Republicans. Sorry, go ahead. Arguing that. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm afraid I'm out of time, but Sophie, I'm going to give you this airtime. I commit sometime next week, because this story isn't going anywhere. It's going to be alive next week as well. But shifting focus now to External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar, who will be in Johannesburg for the G20 meeting of foreign ministers on the 20th and 21st of February. While Dr. Jaishankar's American counterpart, Marco Rubio, will skip the event, but his Chinese counterpart and Russian counterparts are set to attend the meeting. While Dr. Jaishankar is likely to informally meet these two, that is Wang Yi and Sergei Lavrov, a formal bilateral meeting is also not ruled out, as per some reports, and will depend on the schedule of the leaders. Jaishankar had last met Wang at the G20 Rio summit in November, during which they discussed ways to take the relationship forward following the border disengagement talks on the sidelines. Jaishankar also met his counterparts from Singapore and Brazil, where they discussed important bilateral issues. Moving on, terror organization Hamas has handed over the bodies of 4 Israeli hostages that were held in Gaza since the 7th of October 2023. This is the first time that the group has released deceased captives since they invaded Israel. The hostages are said to include the bodies of Shiri Bibas, who was 32 when she and her two young sons, that is Ariel 4 and Kafir, just 9 months old, were abducted from their home in southern Israel more than 16 months ago. Hamas had previously claimed, without providing any evidence, that the Bibas' children and their mother were killed in an Israeli airstrike. Hamas is also set to release 8 living hostages, exceeding the earlier expectation of 3. All right, on that note, we slip into a very short break. We come back with lots more on the other side, including an exclusive conversation with Sidharth Mudgal, who is one of the candidates for the upcoming German election. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching India Global. We now turn our attention to the German election. Germany goes to polls on the 23rd of February, and joining me is the first Indian origin German election candidate on NDTV. Well, from Jaipur to Bundestag, Sidharth Mudgal has had quite a journey, and let's get him to understand more about what his journey has been like. Sidharth, good to have you on NDTV. Before we talk about your plans and what you wish to do, I want to first ask you about your journey from Jaipur and now to Germany, which is now your second home or your primary home now, actually.
Thanks, Gaurie, and thanks for having me on the show. I've been in Germany for 21 years. I came to Germany as a student a long time back, 21 years ago. And I came here to study, and then as things changed, I decided to stay in Germany. And Germany's home for me now.
It is. So what's your vision when it comes to India-German ties? You've done a lot of work in the last decade in terms of associations and business collaborations. What's your vision for the future?
Germany and India are natural partners. They need to do more together. And the current government, the BJP government, and also in the past, we are building on this collaboration. So it is on one side on the trade side. So we need more investments in Germany. We need more jobs in Germany. And now the things have changed. India should be investing in Germany, right? And that is one thing which is super important right now, specifically in the area of manufacturing. There are a lot of small and mid-sized companies where Germany, there's no succession planning, and India can profit from this scenario. And obviously, there's a lot of things going around digitalization and artificial intelligence, where Germany can learn a lot from India.
Talk to us about the Indian diaspora. It's about 3 lakh plus. Talk to us about it, the fields where it's making the mark the most, and the issues that matter to the diaspora in these German elections.
So first of all, the Indian diaspora has increased threefold in the last 20 years. And this is only, let's say, the Indian citizens here. And then there are people like myself who are German citizens of Indian origin, right? Mostly what people are worried about in the Indian diaspora is the right-wing party, for example, AfD, and what does it mean for them, right? So this is one question which a lot of people are asking right now. But let me also tell you the biggest issues facing the Germany as a country are not migration, but rather the economic downturn. And when I talk to people in the community, but also rest of the people, this is something which they're very concerned about. Unemployment, the gross domestic product going down, the trade volumes going up and down. And this instability is something which is worrying a lot of people. And migration obviously is an issue with the recent attacks in Munich, where unfortunately 2 people died, a mother and a child. These are some things which are also of concern to people in Germany.
Well, one thing that one keeps reading about these German elections sitting here in India is the number of times Elon Musk seems to be featured in stories and issues related to the election. Talk to us about what's actually the role Elon Musk may play or is playing in these elections.
Look, information is power. Elon Musk sits at the source of, let's say, a big tool, a big instrument, which is Twitter. But I must say, Elon Musk, he should be focusing more on American politics or in his home country, but for that matter of fact, South Africa, rather than German politics. He, according to me, doesn't know much about the Alternative for Germany, which is a right-wing party. They are extremists in nature and all sort of things. So I recommend Elon Musk better literature so that he knows who he wants to support and he does not want to support. It's erratic what he's doing, but once again, it's a choice. He's a business leader. He might have some reasons to do that. I do not think that's the right way to do it.
You're in these elections, you're contesting, you're meeting people on ground. You said economy is one of the biggest issues that the people are likely to vote on. What's your agenda to address some of these issues that voters are going to take to the polls?
So I think some of the issues which are facing German economy is bureaucracy and red tape. So this is something which I'm concretely saying that any sort of issuing of government clearances should be done in a record amount of time. This time should be reduced by 50% in the next 1 to 2 years by setting up a one-stop shop for such clearances. The second important thing, according to me, is how do we revive the economy, specifically the small and mid-sized companies in Germany, so the so-called Mittelstand, which are basically 99% of our companies, more or less. How do we make sure that they get jobs back into the country? And for them, I'm proposing tax benefits, tax discounts, and actually a bonus. So for every €1 they invest in latest technologies, artificial intelligence, robotics, the government should give them 10 cents on top. So this is something which we are focusing on. Also then bonuses for companies who are getting jobs back into Germany. So that's an important aspect. We need more jobs for our people here, irrespective of which country they come from. That's something which we need to be focusing on as well. And then on digitalization, I'm proposing that we set up national innovation centers, 5 in number, it could be 6, but basically investing 10 billion euros every year specifically on digitalization and innovation, which will also create jobs, but it will also strengthen our relationships with partner countries.
Okay.
Last but not the least, I'm also proposing that we specifically reach out to partner companies who share our democratic values to invest in Germany. And this is something which will actually help our partnership with India as well.
You know, I want to ask you this, Siddharth, as a member of the diaspora, as an immigrant yourself, how do you see the rise of the right movement in EU and in Germany as well now?
So specifically, there's a general tendency right now of people trying to blame everything which is going wrong in the economy, in the countries, on migrants. Now, this is an easy choice to make, right? But if you go into the details there are basically 2 types of migrants. One are, I would say, migrants who are coming here who Germany needs, so people who are qualified, educated, etc. And then on the other way around, it's people who need Germany. And our responsibility, moral responsibility as a mature democracy, is to support people who need us, right?
Right.
And this philosophy is part of, let's say, the European system. And I think politicians need to do a better job in making this clear to the public, and so that other right-wing extremist parties do not misuse fear or the so-called angst which the German people have to be instrumentalized.
Siddharth, in a couple of days, we will know which way Germany actually votes, but really appreciate you taking out the time and speaking to us, and wish you the very best in these elections. 24th of February is when we will know who has Germany elected to take the country forward. On that note, time out on this edition of India Global. We slip into a break. On the other side is a very exclusive conversation with 2 professors from Harvard to talk to us about the India-US relationship under Donald Trump's second administration and what could be the key driving focus areas in that relationship. Stay with us and watch that special conversation. Professor Kompas, Professor Gandhi, thank you so much for speaking to me on NDTV. Let me start first by asking in terms of the big thing when you see, we're talking at a time when there's been an important meeting that has taken place between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump. In your assessment, how do you see the larger India-US relationship going? It's not just about the politics aspect of it. I think economy and trade is going to be really central to this relationship going forward. Your thoughts on that, sir?
Yes, I think the U.S.-India relationship from an India perspective, if I kind of view that lens, is an extremely important one. I would say it's right up there. and for a variety of reasons. So one is on technology flow, like you said, and we can get into that more. The second is on capital flows. I mean, ultimately, India does need more capital to grow and sustain its economy. It's the highest growth large economy, but it is capital deficient. And so capital flows is the second one. Talent flows is the third one. So there's a huge number of areas where U.S.-India collaboration, I think, is actually, underperforming. And therefore, there's massive upside opportunity to kind of take it to the next step.
Professor Gompers, if you were to talk, about the technology aspect of it and also the kind of opportunities it throws up, the one very interesting thing between when, this meeting of the two heads of state was the focus on technology, whether it is biotech, whether it is semiconductors, whether it is defense. How do you see that helping and really becoming a catalyst for India when it comes to starting the ecosystem for all these technologies?
Yeah, so if we look at the last decade, one of the global success stories in sort of startups is clearly India. It's transition to an economy in which many of the best and brightest want to go. They want to start something. They want to build a national champion. And the last decade was really driven by companies focused on doing things in the Indian market. It's a huge market. You can build a multi-billion-dollar unicorn success by focusing on India. But I think that your question sort of is the right one, because if we look going forward, I think over the next decade, we're going to see almost as many global success stories. I think, India currently has, I think, something like 117 unicorns. But 98% of those are focused on the Indian market itself. I think what you're going to see is, given this new focus on collaboration, focus on technology, we're going to see centers of excellence in biotechnology, in AI, in other areas in which Indian startups and Indian technology will be sort of global leaders in many areas.
In fact, you spoke about AI. I wanted to come on that. There's also been an AI Action Summit. India was one of the co-chairs. Again, a lot of focus on the technologies of the future, which is AI. How do you see India's role in that, and how do you think that will build the ecosystem that one wants?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things. So the first ingredient that India has in abundance is just talent. It's got great STEM education. It's got great universities. I think the piece which has sort of been growing is both the public and the private funding of the sort of the R&D component of that. And I think there'll be increasing global interest. Again, from one of the areas that I study is certainly sort of the venture capital space. And one of the things that we've seen is this increasing flow of capital, primarily from the U.S. into India. And back to this point that I think that's been the biggest missing ingredient. It's got the talent, but you need the capital flows to fund the R&D, to fund sort of the science, and then we're going to see the emergence of these global winners.
I'm going to come to the semiconductor bit in just a while. You wanted to add on that, Professor Gandhi? Go ahead, take this. Yeah.
So just adding on that, I think one of the key things, for example, there are a couple of examples of companies just on that in terms of the talent piece. So one of them told me that essentially a PhD in India with the same qualification and same caliber of a PhD, say, in the US one costs 6x as to what an Indian PhD costs. And so if you think about having the same talent in terms of the R&D, because India has really been missing the whole aspect of deep tech. It's really been much more of SaaS and consumer facing, and how do we kind of scale it up quickly and things like that. So I think going forward, for India to become a more bigger center of excellence, this tapping in of deep, high quality talent, and not just the talent that kind of supports outsourcing and things like that, but this is deep research and development type of talent, along with longer term capital orientation, is, I think, which, as Professor Gompers just said, is really what is kind of going to change, in my view, in the next 10 years.
And do you see the role of the state, or how do you see the role of the state in that? Because, yes, there is now a large, vibrant tech ecosystem in India. It is driven and geared towards specific industries. You mentioned consumer facing yourself. But, from a larger strategic point of view, others also need to be pushed? What do you think would be the role of the state there?
So typically the role of the state could be, providing a capital, but in this case, I think that the real role of the Indian state should be to facilitate the flowing of private capital. India, again, just given all the various demands, given the demands on education, healthcare, poverty alleviation, given all those demands, I think India has been lacking the capital to actually invest in long-term, deep tech-oriented opportunities. But what it should do is create or facilitate both, whether it be through fiscal incentive systems, through physical infrastructure, through various incentive systems to actually facilitate both private capital and private talent going into the area.
You want to add to that, sir?
Yeah. So I couldn't agree more. And what's interesting here, and you talk about sort of the recent meetings between Trump and Modi, that the time is now for India. So if we think about the current tensions between the U.S. and China, and you were going to ask a second ago about semiconductors, there's a huge opportunity here for investment in semiconductor in India, given, again, both the engineering talent, the skills there. And so my own view is that if you set the playing field right, if you make it easier for private capital to come in, provide the infrastructure, I actually think that again, the opportunity in multiple sectors, semiconductors, AI, and the like, is absolutely enormous.
How do we sort of plug the gap? I mean, you mentioned, I'm going to come to you, sir, which is that you mentioned that we need to get some of those factors right. We have talent. We need to build in on the infrastructure. But if you were to probably just highlight, let's say, the top 2 ingredients for the sake of simplifying, which is, of course, a very important and a layered conversation. But to simplify it, if there were top 2 conditions that you would want, specifically for semiconductors.
So specifically for semiconductors, one, I think the infrastructure has to be put in place to support the semiconductor industry. And then the second thing are on regulations about capital flows and incentives to bring that capital in. And if we think about some of the countries which have done it really, really well, look at Singapore, for example. Singapore is a tiny country, but the flow of both talent and capital into Singapore is driven by the fact that it's easy, the business regulations have been massively simplified. You've got the regulatory controls around capital, again, far simplified. And so what I would say is that relying on the private sector and allowing the private sector to operate in a way that isn't so regulatory heavy is probably the biggest and most important factor in my mind.
Professor Gandhi, you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, so adding to that, in terms of the China +1 strategy, just building on what Professor Campos just said. So the China +1 strategy in India has been somewhat successful. If you think about it, but a few years ago there were no iPhones being built in India. Now a reasonable percentage of iPhones are being built in India. There's other examples like that, whether it be in automobiles. But again, when I speak with folks who are doing this, that there was so much more that could be done, and so much more could have will come out of this meeting that you refer to that's just happened. But there still are a lot of hurdles. There are, whether it be regulation, whether it be land acquisition, whether it be labor laws and kind of clearing up this labor law. So there's given the policy pronouncements here in the last couple of years, I think the government clearly recognizes that, but I do think more could be done. The other thing I would say is that because, given the federal system, you'll see that there are clearly some states that have actually done a lot of this, are getting a disproportionate share of capital flowing in. And so therefore there are good examples of taking that kind of those, what I would say, best in class and scaling them up.
Yeah, so there are some enclaves of successful government policy and that have attracted more investments and more needs to be done. But the fact is some of these are state subjects,
Right.
So you cannot have central laws when it comes to land being one of them. Such a political hot potato. But coming back to, you mentioned the China +1 and the supply chains. Under President Trump, how do you see that evolving and allowing India, or do you see that allowing India more opportunities? Because that could also mean probably, the nature of Quad also changing. from being almost like a soft power where it's more about disaster recovery and vaccines and that to becoming more about supply chains. Do you see that evolution happening and allowing India the opportunity, and how do you see that coming through in the next couple of years?
No, I clearly see that as an opportunity. So it's one of the things where there's the government policy or dialogue, but ultimately supply chains are driven by the private sector. And so it's really the private companies that are disproportionately perhaps reliant on China to kind of move that to India. And there again, that's where the policy comes in. I think a lot more will happen. I would say that the production-linked incentive scheme that the government has put in place has been positively received. I think it's structured in a way that stimulates investment in the near term, but takes away subsidies in the long term once performance targets are met. And I think those are the kind of policies which need to be continued. But once you see more dialogue happening at the government-to-government level, I do think that it also encourages the private sector then to do more, because you're seeing a kind of political. As far as the Quad goes, I really don't have a point of view on that. It was set up more as a political kind of system. So I'm not sure whether the Quad really would replace or be a kind of a trade bloc for supply chains. I mean, I think Australia, Japan, India are going to kind of do their own thing from a supply chain standpoint.
Sure. The only reason I said that is because under President Trump, it could just be going in a different direction. But, coming to the tech part of it, and the other aspect, we spoke about talent, we spoke about how there is a lot of, Indian talent, which sort of also pushes a lot of the IT sector and tech industries here in America. But we also talk at a time when there's been a lot of discussion around, should tech talent from India be, allowed here freely, or should there be more barriers that should be created? Of course, there is a political connotation to this conversation, but that has really been amplified, hasn't it, sir? Yeah. Whether you take the H-1B visas or whether you take any other form of allowing more tech talent from India to enter, how do you see that evolving and going?
I recently wrote a paper where we looked at all the founders of US-backed venture-backed companies, and we were able to identify the immigrants versus the local, the American founders. And what we found is that 22% of US venture-backed tech founders are immigrants who came for either their education or to work. But the interesting thing is that that 22% is far more successful. So if you compare that 22% to, say, American-founded companies, they have something like, the returns are 50% higher, more likely to go public, and so they're far more successful. So the US clearly benefits from this. How does India benefit? One of the things that we've actually seen, and we have the data to show this as well, is that there's a huge returning population. So one of the things that we've seen over the last really 5 to 7 years is that as the tech and startup scene in India has flourished and grown, we've actually seen a reverse brain drain, in which more and more of the sort of Indian founders and those who have joined startups are returning and starting that next generation of companies in India. And so I actually think this flow of talent in and out of the US, it's great for the US, but I actually think it's great for India. And especially if we think about moving to deep tech, I think it's going to be the seeds of many of the best deep tech companies in India, where sort of Indians who have come to the US, have experience in the top US deep tech companies, are going to see the opportunity to build something on a global scale in India. And so my own view is this is a good thing.
You want to come in on that, sir? The reverse brain drain that Professor Gompas was talking about?
Yeah, So I could maybe do it from, since we are sitting here at the Harvard Business School. So these are not technologists or the scientists, but if I look at just MBA students, compared to say 5 or 10 years ago, where Indian MBA students would want to stay back in the US, I'm seeing, I have a bunch of my own students in the last 3-4 years who have now startups. They're in Bangalore. Yeah. Who are basically gone right back. They were actually working on their business plans while they were here. With the whole intention of going back. And so you take the business education piece of it, you couple that with engineers and qualified PhDs, and you put that together, I think that's going to be a killer combination going forward.
When you talk about the trade relationship between India and US, there's been a clear intent to increase that going forward. It's about $120 billion. The public intent is to double it in the next 5 to 6 years. What shape and form will that take? Because it cannot be that the industries that are doing well will be the ones that'll double up, right? How do you, as someone who understands business, as someone who knows where this future business would really lie, where do you see that growth potential really coming in for the bilateral trade to really increase from its present to double?
So I think there's a variety of areas, and also it could again be part of the China One Plus strategy, because so much of it right now, India's largest trade partner actually is China. So again, from a personal national security perspective, that there's an incentive to do that. But I think some of the things which was talked about, like whether it be space, defense, and I think even just basic things like consumer products, there is actually the opportunity to increase that flow between the two countries remains very high. It has been underperforming. I guess the counter to that would be that I'm not sure where the announcement around tariffs, at least what I read, is that the biggest negative impact on that would be on India and Brazil. Mm-hmm. So that's a big question mark in my mind, that if tariffs kind of go up and things become, the barriers are kind of put up, whether this doubling, it's hard for me to see how trade doubles when tariffs go up, at least in the near term.
Your thoughts on that, sir?
Yeah, so maybe I'm a little bit more of an optimist here. I think that certainly the Trump administration is using tariffs to get what they want. But I think strategically, if you think about where would the Trump administration want to source products and technology products and the like, it's not going to be China. Back to the iPhone example again. I think that when we look, and if we think about sort of the tech sector broadly, I think there's a tremendous opportunity to build value-added sort of tech sort of facilities and production and like in India, because and if I think about whether it be Apple, whether it be Google, whether it be any of these other tech companies, even in the biomedical space, you talked about that as well. I think that there's a tremendous opportunity, and I think the Trump administration would much rather build those kinds of bilateral trade relationships today with India as opposed to China, given some of the tensions that we've actually seen. And so while tariffs are waived as sort of this, listen, you need to give me what I want, I actually think at the end of the day, if I had to guess, 5 years from now, all of this will have been to the benefit of India.
And how much of a tool are they from a geopolitical point of view?
Interesting question. We can only speculate in terms of the inner workings of what President Trump thinks. But certainly, whether we see it on sort of the trade and business side, whether we see it in sort of geopolitical conflicts, he portrays himself as being somewhat crazy, and I think he does this in a shrewd way to try and get an agreement. So again, we can all have our assessment of whether or not we think that's good or bad, but I think he throws out crazy potential policies, and at the end of the day, there will be agreements.
So professors can get away by calling heads of state all sorts of things. Journalists, unfortunately, do not have that luxury. I won't say any of that. But let me then ask you this about speaking about geopolitical aspects. The one thing that I also want to touch upon is that there is a huge expectation that the Russia-Ukraine war is set to end. Whatever may be the political solution, how do you see the larger impact of that? Because it's been an overhang. It's been an overhang from an economic point of view, from a trade point of view. You take the commodities market, all of it have seen an overhang of that war. If it comes to an end, how do you see that reshaping global trade global finance? And that's a question to both of you.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah, no, I understand, but I'm not sure I'm quite qualified to answer that question, quite honestly.
No,
Yeah.
I'm just asking from
So-
understanding point of view. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, so again, I'm not going to express my own policies on this, but I mean, clearly, given the close relationships that India's had with both Russia and the U.S., I think to the extent that there is a reasonable peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia, again, I think that goes to the benefit of India, because I think it stabilizes both those relationships. And again, I'm not going to speak about where I think it should end, but I think if it were to end, I think that would be on a macro level good for India.
Mm-hmm. You don't want to add anything to that, sir? I mean, I wanted to.
Well, clearly it would be. India has come under a lot of pressure when the war broke out on reducing
Also
its
from a
relationship
global
with Russia.
economy point of view.
Yeah.
So look, from a global economy point of view, when a conflict comes to an end and there's more certainty on the future, that's always good, right? So and that, I know it's a very general kind of comment, but the fact of the matter is that when a big conflict comes to an end, there'll be more stability going forward. There's more comfort in capital flows, more comfort in making long-term investments. So from that perspective, I mean, a war coming to an end can only be a good thing for the world.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah. But okay, so final question to both of you, which is the, I think that is important for our viewers to also sort of get a sense of, when we talk about A, India-US relationship, B, India's future. What, according to you, would be that one thing that you would watch out for that could really change the game when you talk about India's future potential?
As I mentioned, and I think we alluded to this a little bit earlier, when we see India's Google or we see India's sort of Microsoft coming out, I think we will know that the foundation which was laid over the last 15 or 20 years has borne its fruit. And I think we will. I think we'll see global tech winners coming out of India. And for me, I think we'll know that India has arrived.